Welcome to another devlog for my indie game, Synthetic Girlfriend. Synthetic Girlfriend is a story-driven puzzle video game in which you romance cute robotic girls, and the choices you make and the puzzles you solve affect the outcome of the story.
It's Christmas time, and one of the things I wanted the game to have was a pretty Christmas scene with one of the girls. But how would you track in-game time until Christmas? Yeah, sure, I could make it so I would tell the player what day it is at the beginning of each story beat, but that's not fun. That's way too easy for me. I like to overcomplicate things for myself.
So I decided that since the game's story takes place in the span of a year, I figured I could work on a calendar system to track the character's progression over the course of that story. Okay, so my idea was that I could use a scriptable object for each in-game day. What's a scriptable object? Well, Unity defines it as a data container that you can use to save large amounts of data independent of class instances. In my case, I'm gonna have to store huge amounts of data in the form of days. Each day will have several periods like early morning, lunch break, evening, late night, and so on, just like the Persona games. Each period will have to hold data regarding where to spawn what NPCs and what dialogue they'll have to say depending on the date and the time of the day. This approach might be a bit intricate, but it will give me a lot of freedom controlling the flow of the day-to-day gameplay part. The easiest example I could think of is to have characters say good morning when it's morning time, or say goodbye when it's time to leave work. From here I could do all sorts of things like spawning special NPCs during certain days, or activating special events during other days. By the way, if the game looks different on this footage, it is because I started working on this calendar system months ago, before I made any of the recent changes. I kept at it bit by bit until I could solve one giant bug that was keeping me from continuing to work on it, which was why this system was postponed for so long.
However, as I stated on Devlog 6.5, I could finally solve that bug and got the main feature of this calendar system working, and that's what prompted me to get back to work on it again. The main feature of this system being NPCs changing dialogue, position, and availability depending on what in-game day it is.
Okay, so NPCs were spawning with the dialogue assigned to them depending on the day and the time of day. But how do I change the day? My first thought was using Unity's integrated scene switching. You see, Unity works with scenes, which are basically worlds where the game happens. You can change scenes, and you can add scenes on top of other scenes, and even reload the same scene after a game over, for example. So I read a bit of the documentation and made a simple scene reload function, and everything is broken. I quickly came to the realization that I had no idea of what I was doing, so it was time to watch some tutorials. This time I also followed Game Dev Experiments tutorials on how to deal with stuff like this. These really are carrying my game forward. Right, I read about this before. I have to make the core objects persistent in some way. Unity has a pretty nifty method that's called Don't Destroy on Load, which effectively makes objects survive throughout the scene changes. But I realize now I need another scene to test things out. Time to make a new scene to switch to and from. Here I'm making Yuri's office. I haven't made any new assets since the last time I worked on the Nagai robotics building, so nothing new to see here. Sorry, I can change them later on. I also need to place some portals so you can switch between scenes. Okay, so I have two scenes, but the game doesn't know that yet, so I have to go into the build settings and add Yuri's office to the list. There we go. Okay, let's try it and... Huh? The portal is behaving like a solid wall. Oh, I forgot to make it a trigger collision and not a solid collision. Oops. Okay, here we go. And Yuri's falling through the endless void. Same. In fact, you can see how far he's falling down. This stumped me for a second, but I decided to add a fade in and fade out transition in between, not only to mask the scene switching, but also because those transitions take control away from the player, so it would give the game some time to load everything and position Yuri properly without the player interfering. And that solved the issue. Nice! Time to get back to Nagai's robotic main hub. Why is everyone gone? So what happens is that I'm only spawning the characters whenever the awake function is called, which is basically when the game first starts. I ended up fixing it later on.
I was also thinking of not just spawning the NPCs, but rather have them already exist in the scene and enable and disable them as I needed. That way I could also save a bit of processing time, since I wouldn't have to be constantly instantiating them.
This is because of how the cutscene system is set up. I can't assign prefabs, which are like reference to objects you can spawn, to the cutscenes in the cutscene system. I have to assign already existing game objects, so having those NPCs already exist in the world is the way to go, right?
At least that's what I was thinking, until
it turns out that I can assign already existing game objects to the calendar system and I have to resort to prefabs. Well, it seems the two systems are incompatible with one another. That kinda sucks big time. So I guess instantiating the NPCs for the day-to-day gameplay is the only way.
After giving it some thought, I decided that one workaround could be having dummy NPCs that are already in the scene and for the cutscenes to use. These dummy NPCs could be disabled until whatever cutscenes require them, and then enable them when they are needed. Then I could disable them and spawn NPC prefabs that walk around and you can talk to once regular gameplay resumes and the player is handed back control over Yuri. I'm aware it's not the best solution and it's kinda hacky, but I don't have the knowledge yet to come up with another solution.
So I spent some more time refactoring the NPC spawning code because there was a bug where the NPCs didn't spawn at all. Taking inspiration from the teleport shenanigans, I also added a fainting transition to this part of the code, and that solved it. Sweet! Now the days change and the characters spawn properly, with different lines of dialogue according to the current in-game day. I spent some more time adding some extra days, months, and even the second year of gameplay. I also wrote some code to tie all of these transitions together. Okay, now I need some sort of UI to tell the player where in time they are set. That was the whole point of this system after all. I'm just gonna make a really ugly UI that's only for testing purposes, as UI is a whole topic on its own, and I'm not tackling that one in this video. Yeah, it's really ugly, I know, but I'll improve upon it later down the line. It seems I have some of the variables mixed up, and here I was thinking I named them properly in a non-confusing way. Oh well. I also forgot to add the current period to the UI. I think I want to use icons for the periods in the final UI, but for now I'll just keep using words. And after some more ugly UI making and coding and some bug fixing, here it is. Now I know this doesn't look fancy at all, but trust me when I tell you this is the foundation of the whole game's premise, both in terms of gameplay and story. Well, this calendar system and the puzzle minigame anyway. Oh yeah, speaking of the puzzle minigame,
while I was working on this video, I was also fiddling around with porting the puzzle minigame to Unity. Sadly, I don't have any footage yet, since all the things I've been working on are behind the scenes stuff and there's nothing too visual, but if you don't know what the puzzle minigame is about, then I'll leave a link to a prototype I made using JavaScript last year. In the puzzle minigame, you can slide entire rows or columns of circles just by clicking and dragging the mouse in the direction you want to slide them. Get all the circles in the respective color spaces to win. Again, it's a prototype and there's a few bugs here and there, but the later levels are a bit challenging, so I hope you have fun with it. Alright, I think I talked about everything I wanted already, so I think this is it for this video. Stay tuned for an end of the year update video next week. Alright, until next time, adios.